Hello students, this is Mr. Little again. I'm just gonna quick make this little video to supplement the lecture slides I gave you, only because I think the part of the pictures that discuss syncretism may not be entirely clear without a little context. So I'm gonna make this really short video just kind of going over those pictures and sort of what they mean or how you can look at them to make it a little more clear. So hopefully you read this slide, but I'll quick go over it. So syncretism or syncretism, depending on where you put the emphasis on the sin or the cret part, there's no real correct way to say it, is basically the combination of different beliefs and blending of practices and various thoughts. And so this is a really big concept throughout AP world history because we see it happen a lot, where a new idea comes somewhere and it arrives somewhere and then it changes, or it changes over time when it gets there, and sometimes it changes over time and then it goes back to its original place in a different form. And so this process of syncretism affects almost every belief throughout human history, as well as the fact that it allows beliefs to move about more easily. It's easier to come to see something as familiar if you can recognize it. So let's take a look at a few examples from these three classical religions that involve syncretism. So this is the first one. This is the Greco-Buddhist example. And this sculpture right here, this is a relief from what's now Afghanistan, where there once existed a Greek kingdom, or several Greek kingdoms collectively known as the Bactrian kingdoms. And here we have the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, but next to him we have Hercules, or what is believed to be Hercules, as a bodhisattva or possibly a companion of the Buddha. And this is really, this is a big deal for a couple reasons. One is that prior to the entrance of the Greeks into South Asia and the establishment of these kingdoms and the influence of Greek culture, depictions of the Buddha as a human was a very rare thing. It didn't happen very often. Most depictions of the Buddha did not have him as a human. You might have had his feet. As a child, you might have had the chakra dharma, which is one of the symbols of Buddhism. You might have had a picture of an empty throne, symbolizing the fact that the Buddha gave up his throne to spread this message. And so it's this Greek influence that really shapes the way we in the West see the Buddha in terms of its human form. If you in the United States see a Buddha that's not from somewhere in East Asia like China or Japan or Korea, most likely it will look something like this sort of. It's got that very three-dimensional Greek statue look to it. And also just the inclusion of Hercules indicates that this is a combining of Greek mythology and Buddhism into sort of a form that Greeks would have recognized. So this is just one kind of example of syncretism. Another really good one is this is two images of the same person. On the left is the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who is one of the main bodhisattvas of compassion. And in some Buddhist texts, he's actually the creator of the world. It just depends on which school of Buddhism you're talking about. And on the right, you have Guan Yin, who is considered the key bodhisattva of compassion in Chinese Buddhism and other parts of East and Southeast Asian Buddhism. And one of the things to note right away is the switch in gender. Avalokiteshvara is usually depicted in a male form of some sort, as a man, whereas Guan Yin is usually given feminine characteristics. And this was a huge switch. Now, Guan Yin is actually just the Chinese transliteration of Avalokiteshvara, and so that's why they have two different names. But after the Song dynasty in the 12th century, depictions of Avalokiteshvara start to disappear in Chinese Buddhism, and they start to be replaced by depictions of Guan Yin. Now, Guan Yin is very popular. As I said, you can find literally statues to her in almost any Buddhist temple across China. It's a really big deal. She's very, very popular. And so this is a really interesting example of a individual like kind of swapping genders or switching perceptions of the role of compassion between one part of the world and another part of the world. And so this is one of my favorite examples of syncretism, just kind of a fusion, a change over when you get to East Asia. In China, there were a number of pre-existing religions that had female figures as individuals of great compassion. Another one is there's a Chinese mystical figure called Ma Zi, who also is a figure of great compassion and the protector of sailors. And a lot of times depictions of Ma Zi will look very much like Kuan Yin. So again, it's just sort of an interesting example of syncretism, kind of changing and blending as it goes. This is another one. This is one of my kind of favorite examples of syncretism, which is these are both statues of Vishnu and a Garuda. I say a Garuda because sometimes there's a very specific Garuda. Sometimes it's just generic Garuda, but a Garuda is Vishnu's protector, guardian, assistant, sometimes just form of transportation, depending on the story. Usually a bird of some sort. And we can definitely see the bird elements. Note the feathers here. But what's interesting about these statues, this on the left is Vishnu. This is a statue that's created in India around 1300 years ago. And this was created in Java, what is now Indonesia, about 1,000 years ago. And you'll notice that they both are essentially about the same thing. But notice the difference in proportions. Notice how relatively small Vishnu is here versus how relatively large he is here in relation to his guardian, right? Here, the guardian takes up almost half of the entire sculpture, it seems, as well as the snakes, which are down here. And I believe it's cut off, but there are snakes at the very bottom of this one, but you can't even see them. And this speaks to perhaps a difference in the perceptions of the role of humans. It's speculated that perhaps a pre-existing Javanese religion that emphasized the role of world spirits and animals may in part be responsible for this depiction of Vishnu, in which the god himself only makes up a rather small portion of the overall depiction, right? With the emphasis on the snakes and the guardian spirit. So there may be some syncretism at work there. There may be a little syncretism at work there when Hinduism comes to Java. Another really great example that may be more familiar to people in the United States, to Christians, would be the holiday of Christmas. Now, it's not clear in any of the holy texts of Christianity when exactly Jesus of Nazareth was born. There's a lot of speculation. Some scholars think it might have been during the spring, some think it might have been during the fall, but it's not really known. But what the Western Church, the Catholic Church, eventually settled on was the date December 25th, which we know as Christmas. And the other Christian churches usually have dates somewhere around there. Some of the Eastern churches have it a little bit later in January, but nonetheless, this December was chosen. And part of the reason why it was chosen about 400 years after Jesus of Nazareth lived was that it was a very deliberate attempt to sort of co-opt the pagan rituals that usually accompany the winter solstice, which usually happened at that time. And so, for example, Saturnalia, which was a Roman festival in which social values were turned upside down, so masters would serve slaves, and then women would wear men's clothes and men's would wear women's clothes. The church deliberately wanted to sort of co-opt and sort of bury that tradition. There's also several pagan rituals, such as Yule, which is kind of where we get the term Yule log, which is interesting, right? A Yule log is a fire log we traditionally burn at Christmas time. And the Christmas tree is also an interesting element of this Yule pagan festival. So, fun fact, kind of attempting to co-opt and maybe suppress these holidays actually just ended up incorporating elements into the holiday we have today. Same goes with Easter. That'll be the spring solstice, right? The Easter bunny. What's that got to do with Jesus of Nazareth's rise from the dead? So it was a deliberate attempt to co-opt, but co-opting doesn't necessarily mean completely eliminating an original culture or original cultural practice. And so those are just the examples of syncretism from this presentation that I just wanted to help clarify a little bit to help you understand these slides a little bit better. feel free to reach out to me with an email if you have any questions, and I'll see you in class.